I thought the silence after my father's death would be the heaviest thing I had to carry. But I was wrong. The real weight didn't settle until I sat in the county courthouse, watching my sister, Celeste, smooth her skirt and accuse me of stealing an inheritance that barely existed. In Briar Hollow, grief is just an intermission before the gossip starts, and Celeste had decided to turn my mourning into a crime scene. The humidity in Briar Hollow was the kind that ruined hair and made grief feel sticky. It was 80 degrees in October, a damp, suffocating warmth that pressed against the windows of the funeral home and made the heavy velvet drapes look exhausting. I stood near the entrance of the viewing room B, shaking hands that felt too moist and listening to variations of the same sentence I had heard for 3 days. He is in a better place now. At least he is not suffering anymore. You were such a good daughter to stay with him. Kennedy. That last one always came with a look. It was a sympathetic tilt of the head that stopped just short of pity. In Briar Hollow, being 33, unmarried, and living in your childhood home to care for a dying parent was not seen as a noble sacrifice. It was seen as a failure to launch, a soft tragedy that people discussed in hushed tones over iced tea. They did not know about the nights I spent sleeping on the floor next to his bed, because the rails rattled when he thrashed. They did not know about the spreadsheet I kept to track his oxygen levels, or the way I had to learn to negotiate with insurance adjusters who thought a stroke recovery timeline was a fixed geometric line. To them, I was just Kennedy, the quiet one, the one who stayed. I adjusted the collar of my black dress. It was simple, bought off the rack at a department store 3 towns over because I did not want to run into anyone I knew while buying the clothes I would wear to bury my father. My father, Grant Evans, lay in the mahogany casket at the front of the room, surrounded by sprays of white lilies that smelled cloying and sweet, like sugar rotting in the sun. I had spent the last 72 hours swallowed by the logistics of death. It is a strange thing that nobody warns you about. You think grief will be a tidal wave of emotion, but mostly it is paperwork. It is choosing between the satin or velvet lining. It is deciding if you want the obituary to run for 1 day or 3. It is answering phone calls from relatives who want to know if there is a block of rooms reserved at the Holiday Inn, as if this were a wedding and not a wake. I looked at the clock on the wall. The service was scheduled to start in 10 minutes. The room was 3/4 full, a testament to the man my father had been before the stroke took his voice and his mobility. He had been a pillar of the community, a businessman who shook hands firmly and donated to the high school football team. People remembered that version of him. They preferred that version. And then the double doors at the back of the room swung open. The hush that fell over the room was instant. It started at the back and rolled forward like a physical wave. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The scent of expensive gardenia perfume arrived before she did. Celeste. My sister walked into the funeral home as if she were walking onto a stage. She wore a black dress that cost more than my car, tailored to perfection, with a wide-brimmed hat that was just on the right side of dramatic. Her husband, a man whose name I often forgot because he spoke so little, trailed behind her like a shadow. Celeste Evans, the golden child, the one who had left Briar Hollow 10 years ago to marry money in Atlanta and only came back for Christmas. And even then, only for the dinner. She stopped in the center of the aisle. She pressed a handkerchief to dry eyes and let out a shuddering breath that was loud enough for the back 2 rows to hear. "Oh, Daddy," she whispered. I watched her from my station by the guest book. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Celeste had not visited in 6 months. When I called her 3 weeks ago to tell her the doctors said it was the end, she had told me she was in the middle of a renovation and could not possibly get away. But she was sending her prayers. Now, she was here, and she was the grieving daughter. She moved through the crowd, accepting hugs with a gracious, tragic nod. She bypassed the cousins who were waiting to speak to her and walked straight toward me. The room watched. They loved this. The Evans sisters, together again. The tragic beauty of it. Celeste stopped in front of me, up close. Her makeup was flawless. There was no evidence of the red. puffy ugliness that comes from real crying. She looked at me, and her blue eyes were hard, like chips of ice. She leaned in, bringing that gardenia scent with her. She embraced me, her arms stiff, to the room. It looked like a sister seeking comfort. "You are not getting away with it, Kennedy," she whispered. Her voice was low, a hiss of air against my ear. I pulled back, startled. "What?" She smiled for the audience, patting my arm gently. "I know what you did," she said, her voice dropping again to that dangerous whisper. "I know you made him change it. You think you are so clever, playing the martyr. But you are not getting a dime more than you deserve." "Celeste," I said, my voice shaking, "this is not the place." She stepped back, wiping a non-existent tear from her cheek. "We will see," she said, loud enough for the nearest guest to hear. "We will see, sweetie." She turned and walked toward the casket, falling to her knees in a display of sorrow so profound it made me want to scream. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had no idea what she was talking about. I had not made our father change anything. I had barely been able to get him to eat pudding for the last month, let alone discuss estate planning. The service passed in a blur. The pastor spoke about Grant Evans, the businessman, the father, the friend. He did not mention the Grant Evans who threw his soup bowl across the room because he could not remember the word for spoon. He did not mention the Grant Evans who cried in the middle of the night because he was afraid of the dark. I sat in the front row, staring at the grain of the wood on the casket, feeling the eyes of the town on my back. I could feel Celeste 2 feet away from me, radiating a heat that felt like pure rage. The next morning, the humidity had broken, replaced by a gray, overcast sky that promised rain. I drove my beat-up sedan to the offices of Hale and Mercer LLP for the reading of the will. The law firm was located in one of the preserved historic buildings downtown, all brick and ivy and intimidation. Mr. Mercer had been my father's attorney for 40 years. He was a man who looked like he was made of parchment paper and old tobacco smoke. He sat behind a desk that was wider than my car, his hands folded on top of a leather binder. Celeste was already there. She sat in one of the wingback chairs, her posture rigid. She did not look at me when I entered. "Please, sit down. Kennedy." "Mr. Mercer said. His voice was gravelly. I sat. The chair was cold. "I will keep this brief." "Mr. Mercer said. He opened the binder. "Your father was a man of detail. He wanted to ensure that his estate was handled with the same precision he applied to his business. He began to read. There were bequests to the church, to the local library, to a scholarship fund for the high school. Standard things." Celeste tapped her manicured nail against the arm of her chair. "And now, to the division of the primary assets." "Mr. Mercer said." I held my breath. I did not care about the money. I just wanted this to be over. I wanted to go back to the empty house and sleep for a week, to my daughter. Celeste Evans. Mr. Mercer read. "I leave the entirety of my investment portfolio held at First National, along with the deed to the lake property and the antique collection." Celeste let out a breath. That was significant. The lake property alone was worth a fortune. "And to my daughter, Kennedy Evans," Mr. Mercer continued. "I leave the family home at 412 Elm Street, and I name her co-beneficiary of the Northbridge Heritage Trust." The room went silent. Celeste stood up. "The what, mister?" Mercer looked over his reading glasses. "The Northbridge Heritage Trust." "Celeste, I have never heard of that." Celeste snapped. "What is in it, mister?" Mercer hesitated. "It is a private trust, established by your father 3 years ago. The assets within it are complex, but substantial." How substantial, Celeste demanded. "More than the portfolio, mister." Mercer paused. "In terms of raw valuation, yes, significantly more." Celeste turned to me. Her face was twisted in a way that made her look 10 years older. "You knew about this?" I shook my head. "I have never heard of it." "Celeste, I swear," "Liar," she shouted. Her voice cracked, losing its polished edge. "You were there every day. You whispered in his ear while he was sick. You made him create this trust. And cut me out, Celeste. You got the portfolio and the lake house. Mister, Mercer said calmly, you have hardly been cut out. It is the principal, she yelled. She pointed a finger at me. She manipulated him. She took advantage of a sick old man to get the bulk of the estate. It is undue influence. Celeste, please, I said, reaching out a hand. Do not touch me, she hissed. She grabbed her purse. I am contesting this. You hear me? Mercer, I am contesting everything. And you? She looked at me with pure venom. You better get a good lawyer. Kennedy, because I am going to ruin you. She stormed out of the office, the heavy door slamming behind her. The echo vibrated in the quiet room. Mister, Mercer sighed and took off his glasses. He rubbed the bridge of his nose. I am sorry. Kennedy, he said. Mr. Mercer, I asked, my voice small. What is the Northbridge Heritage Trust? He looked at me, and for a second, I saw something in his eyes that looked like fear, or maybe just deep exhaustion. It is complicated. Kennedy, he said, we will discuss the details next week. For now, go home. Rest. I left the office feeling heavier than I had when I arrived. I drove back to the rental house I'd been staying in since the funeral preparations began. I could not bring myself to sleep in my father's house yet. It was too full of ghosts. I sat on the couch in the rental, staring at the blank television screen. I replayed the last year in my mind. The stroke had happened on a Tuesday. I remembered because I was at the grocery store buying apples. I got the call, left the cart in the middle of the aisle, and drove to the hospital. Celeste came for 2 days, complained about the cafeteria food, and left. I stayed. I moved back home. I learned how to lift a grown man without hurting my back. I learned which spoon he preferred. I learned to decipher his mumbles. I handled the bills because his hands shook too much to write checks. I handled the medical forms because the fine print confused him. Was that manipulation? I remembered the nights he would cry because he felt useless. I would sit by his bed and hold his hand and tell him he was still my dad. I told him I would take care of everything. Did that count as coercion? My stomach churned. I was sick with the fear that people would believe Celeste. In a town like Briar Hollow, the loudest voice usually wins, and Celeste was very, very loud. A knock on the door made me jump. I walked to the front door and peered through the peephole. A delivery driver was walking back to his truck. There was a basket on the porch. I opened the door and brought it inside. It was a generic condolence basket, pears wrapped in gold foil, cheese that did not need refrigeration, crackers that tasted like cardboard. I searched for a card. There was none. I dug through the shredded paper filler. My fingers brushed against something hard and cold. I pulled it out. It was a key. It was a small, silver key, the kind used for a safe deposit box. Stamped on the head of the key were the words Ridgewell Bank and the number 402. I turned it over in my hand. There was no note, no instructions. I picked up my phone and called Hale and Mercer. The receptionist put me through to Mr. Mercer immediately. Mr. Mercer, it is Kennedy. I said, I just received a basket with a key in it for a box at Ridgewell Bank. Did you send this? There was a pause on the other end of the line, a pause that lasted 2 seconds too long. No, Kennedy, Mr. Mercer said. His voice was smooth, too smooth. We did not send anything. Perhaps it is from a relative. It is a bank key. Mr. Mercer, who sends a bank key as a condolence gift? I am sure I do not know. He said, but I have a meeting starting. We will talk next week. He hung up. I stared at the phone. He was lying. I knew the tone of a polite lie. I had heard it enough from doctors telling me my father was making progress when we both knew he was not. My phone pinged. A notification from social media. Celeste Evans has tagged you in a post. My fingers trembled as I opened the app. The photo was of Celeste and our father from 10 years ago, looking happy and healthy. The caption read, "Heartbroken to say goodbye to the greatest man I ever knew. It is a tragedy when grief is compounded by betrayal. It hurts to know that in his final, vulnerable months, he was subjected to financial coercion by those he trusted most to care for him. Justice will be served for you. Daddy." I felt the blood drain from my face. She did not name me, but she did not have to. Everyone knew who had cared for him. Everyone knew who those he trusted most referred to. The messages started coming within minutes. My cousin Sarah Kennedy, I just saw Celeste's post. What is she talking about? Did you make Uncle Grant change his will? My Aunt Linda. We are all praying for the family. I hope the rumors are not true. Kennedy, pressure is a terrible thing. A friend from high school I had not spoken to in 5 years. Thinking of you. Hope this mess gets cleared up. I threw the phone onto the couch as if it were burning. I needed to go to the house. I needed to find the paperwork. I needed to prove that I had tracked every penny, every expense. I had kept receipts. I had a binder. I was not a thief. I grabbed my keys and drove to my father's house. The house sat on a hill overlooking the town, a sprawling Victorian that had seen better days. The paint was peeling on the trim, and the porch sagged on the left side. It was the house I grew up in, the house I had become a prisoner in for the last year. I unlocked the front door. The air inside was stale, smelling of old paper and the lemon cleaner I used to scrub the floors. I walked straight to the study. It was at the back of the house, a room lined with bookshelves and filled with the smell of my father's pipe tobacco. I stopped in the doorway. The room was different. The desk, usually cluttered with stacks of mail and medical bills, was bare. The drawers were slightly open. I walked over to the bookshelves. The framed photos that usually sat there, pictures of me and Celeste as children, pictures of our mother who died when we were young. Pictures of family vacations were gone. The shelves were stripped. I turned to the desk. There was one picture frame left. It was face down on the blotter. I reached out and turned it over. It was a picture of me. Just me. It was from my college graduation. I looked young and hopeful. Why was this the only one left? And why was it face down? It felt like a message, a rejection, or a warning. I pulled open the desk drawers. Empty. The checkbooks were gone. The files on the house were gone. The binder where I kept the medical receipts was gone. It did not look like someone had cleaned. There was no smell of polish. There were dust rectangles where the files had been. This was a search. Someone had come in here and taken everything that could be used as evidence. Celeste. It had to be her. She had a key. She had come here while I was at the rental, or while I was at the funeral home. She had taken everything to build her case, or to destroy mine. I felt a surge of panic. Without those records, how could I prove I had spent the money on his care? How could I prove I had not been siphoning funds? I turned to leave the room, needing air. I walked to the front window of the living room and pulled back the curtain. There was a car parked across the street. It was a dark gray sedan, nondescript. The windows were tinted. It was parked 2 houses down, under the shade of a large oak tree. I watched it. It did not move. In Briar Hollow, you knew your neighbor's cars. Mrs. Higgins drove a blue Toyota. The Millers drove a red truck. I did not recognize this car. I felt a sudden flash of anger that overrode my fear. I was done being watched. I was done being whispered about. I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch. "Hey," I shouted. "Can I help you?" The car sat there for a second. Then, slowly, the engine rumbled to life. It did not peel away. It did not speed off in a panic. It pulled away from the curb with a slow, deliberate calmness. It drove down the street at exactly the speed limit, turning the corner and disappearing from view. They were not afraid of me. They wanted me to know they were there. I went back inside and locked the door. I threw the deadbolt. I checked the back door. Locked. I went into the kitchen and sat at the table. My hands were shaking. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope that had held the safe deposit box key. I needed to look at it again. Maybe I had missed something. I turned the small manila envelope over. It was blank. I reached inside, feeling for any scrap of paper I might have missed. My fingers brushed against a second piece of paper, folded small and wedged into the bottom corner. I pulled it out. It was a slip of notebook paper, torn from a spiral pad. On it, in shaky, jagged handwriting, was a date and a time. October 24th, 2 o'clock. I stared at it. That date was 3 weeks ago, 2 days before he died. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was my father's. But it was not the handwriting of a man who was confused or heavily medicated. It was pressed hard into the paper, the lines sharp and urgent. He had written this. He had hidden it with the key. But he had been bedridden on October 24th. I had been with him all day. Or had I? I closed my eyes, trying to access the blur of those final days. October 24th. That was a Tuesday. I had gone to the pharmacy to pick up his refill. I was gone for 45 minutes. Had someone come here? Had he met with someone? I looked at the key again. Ridgewell Bank. Celeste was suing me for stealing an inheritance I did not know existed. My father's study had been stripped of evidence. A stranger was watching the house, and my father had left me a key to a box that his lawyer claimed to know nothing about. I gripped the key in my hand until the metal bit into my palm. Celeste thought this was about money. She thought this was about who was the favorite daughter. She was wrong. This was about something else. Something my father had been afraid of. Something that made him write a note with a shaking hand and hide a key in a place only I would find. I stood up. The fear was still there, cold and heavy in my stomach. But something else was rising beside it. A resolve. They wanted to paint me as the villain, fine. But if I was going to be the villain, I was going to be the one who uncovered the truth. I put the key and the note back in my purse. I would go to the bank tomorrow. I would open that box, and I would find out what my father was trying to tell me before the silence took him for good. Ridgewell Bank sat on the corner of Main and 4th. A building constructed from limestone blocks so thick they looked like they could survive a bombardment. It was the kind of place where the air conditioning was always set to 68 degrees, and the silence felt expensive. I walked in with the silver key burning a hole in my pocket, feeling underdressed in my cardigan and slacks. The teller line was empty, but I bypassed it, heading straight for the desk of the branch manager, a woman named Mrs. Higgins who had known my father since I was in elementary school. She looked up as I approached, her professional smile faltering for a fraction of a second before she smoothed it back into place. "Kennedy," she said. Standing up, "I was so sorry to hear about Grant. He was a fixture here." "Thank you, Mrs. Higgins," I said. I tried to keep my voice steady. I felt like an imposter. I felt like I was doing something illicit. Even though I held a key he had given me, "I found this key," I said, placing it on the polished wood of her desk. It was in a condolence basket. "I assumed there is a box associated with it, Mrs. Higgins looked at the key. She did not touch it. She looked back at me, and her expression shifted. It was a subtle tightening around the eyes, a withdrawal of warmth. "I see," she said. She typed something into her computer. The keystroke sounded incredibly loud in the quiet bank. "Box 402, she said, reading from the screen. "Yes, that is an active box. Is it under my father's name?" I asked. "Grant Evans." She hesitated. She looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. "No," she said slowly. "It is not under his personal account." "Then whose is it?" Mrs. Higgins clasped her hands in front of her. "It is listed under the Evans Family Foundation." I stared at her. The Evans Family Foundation, I had never heard of it. My father donated to the Rotary Club and the animal shelter. He wrote checks to the church. He did not have a foundation. Foundations were for people like the Vanderbilts, or at least the people who lived in the gated communities on the north side of town. We were comfortable, yes, but we were not foundation people. "Are you listed as a signatory, Mrs.?" Higgins asked. Her tone was cool now. "Careful. I do not know," I said. "I have the key. Possession of the key does not grant access. Kennedy, you know that. If you are not on the signature card..." She trailed off, clicking her mouse. I held my breath. If I could not get in. The trail ended here. "Ah," she said. "What you are here," she said, sounding surprised. "Added 6 months ago. Kennedy Evans? Secretary?" "Secretary?" I asked. She stood up, picking up a ring of master keys. "I will take you back." The walk to the vault was silent. Mrs. Higgins did not ask about the funeral. She did not ask how I was holding up. She walked with a brisk, clipped pace, her heels clicking on the marble. It felt like she wanted me in and out as quickly as possible. The vault was a heavy steel room lined with hundreds of small metal doors. It smelled of cold metal and dust. She located box 402, inserted her master key, and waited for me to insert mine. I did. The lock turned with a heavy clunk. She slid the long metal box out and carried it to a small private viewing room. "Take your time," she said. She closed the door. I was alone. I sat at the small table and stared at the gray metal box. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I flipped the latch and lifted the lid. Inside, there was no cash. There were no diamonds or gold bars. There were 3 things. First, a USB drive. It was bulky. An older model. The kind that looked like a gray plastic thumb. It had a piece of masking tape on it with the initials GRH, written in Sharpie. Second, a single sheet of paper titled Memorandum of Wishes. Third, a sealed white envelope. On the front, in my father's handwriting, it simply said, K.E. I picked up the envelope first. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I slid my finger under the flap and tore it open. I unfolded the letter. It was handwritten on his personal stationery. I feared dragging our name through the mud, but I fear what happens if the foundation falls into the wrong hands even more. Trust your instincts. You are always the observer. You see things people miss, and do not let Celeste make you feel guilty. If you are reading this, Celeste has already chosen the version of me she can live with. You are the only one willing to see me as I was. Love. Dad. I read the line again. Celeste has already chosen the version of me she can live with. Tears pricked my eyes. It was the truest thing he had ever written. Celeste needed him to be the distant, wealthy patriarch who had simply failed her in the end. She could not accept the vulnerable, frightened man I had nursed for a year. I set the letter down and picked up the Memorandum of Wishes. I knew enough about estate law from handling his affairs to know that a Memorandum of Wishes was not legally binding. It was a letter of intent. It was a moral guide for trustees. The document was typed. To the trustees of the Northbridge Heritage Trust, it is my wish that the assets held within the Evans Family Foundation be used to continue the work begun in 2015 regarding the oversight and remediation projects in the Greater Briar Hollow area. Under no circumstances is the control of these assets to be transferred to any individual not explicitly named in the original charter. I specifically request that my daughter, Kennedy Evans, be given full access to the archives associated with Garnet River Holdings. Garnet River Holdings, the initials on the USB drive, G.R.H. I looked at the USB drive. It looked innocuous, just a piece of plastic, but if my father had hidden it in a bank vault, it was dangerous. I put everything back in the envelope, tucked the USB drive into my bra. It felt safer there than in my purse and left the room. Mrs. Higgins was waiting. She took the box without a word and slid it back into the wall. "Have a good day, Kennedy," she said. She did not look me in the eye. I left the bank and sat in my car for a long time, just breathing. The humidity was back, and the air in the car was stifling. I needed to see what was on that drive. I did not own a computer. I had used my father's desktop, but Celeste had access to the house, and I did not trust that she had not installed spyware or simply taken the hard drive. I had my phone, but I could not plug a USB into it. I started the car and drove to a small strip mall on the edge of town. There was a place called Bite Fix, a cluttered shop run by a guy named Dave, who had fixed my father's printer twice. I walked in. The shop smelled of ozone and stale coffee. Dave was behind the counter, taking apart a laptop. "Hey, Kennedy," he said, not looking up. "Heard about your dad. Tough break. Thanks." "Dave," I said. I pulled the USB drive out. "I was wondering if you could help me. I found this among his things. I think there might be photos on it. But I don't have a computer right now. Could you plug it in and just let me see what's on it?" Dave wiped his hands on a rag and took the drive. "Old school," he said. 2 gigabytes. Probably just documents." He plugged it into his terminal. He clicked a few keys. I watched the screen. A folder icon appeared. It was labeled Evans Family Foundation. Confidential. Dave froze. He stared at the screen. Then he looked at the drive. Then he looked at me. He reached out and yanked the drive out of the port without safely ejecting it. "Whoa," he said. He handed it back to me. What I asked. "What is it I can't touch that?" "Kennedy," he said. His voice had dropped. "Dave, it is just a folder. I saw the name." He said, "Evans Foundation. Look, I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" I asked, confused. "It is a charity." He looked around the empty shop, then leaned in. "People ask questions about that foundation. Kennedy, I had a guy in here 6 months ago. Asked me if I ever did data recovery for Grant Evans. Showed me a badge. A badge, I asked. Police." He shook his head. "Not local. State? Maybe federal? I don't know. He just asked about the foundation. I told him I didn't know anything, and I don't. You need to leave. Dave, please, take it somewhere else. Kennedy. Seriously." I walked out of the shop, the USB drive burning against my palm. A badge. Someone had been investigating my father. I drove back to the rental. I felt exposed. I felt like the car behind me was following me, even though it was just a minivan. When I got to the rental, there was a car in the driveway, a black sedan. A woman was standing on the porch. She was tall, wearing a charcoal suit that looked like armor. She held a thick manila envelope. I knew who she was, Marianne Voss, Celeste's attorney. She was a shark in a silk blouse. She was known for divorces that left husbands living in studio apartments. I parked and got out. "Kennedy Evans," she asked. Her voice was pleasant, conversational. "You know who I am." "Marianne," I said. She smiled. It did not reach her eyes. "I have some documents for you," she said, "courtesy of your sister." She held out the envelope. I did not want to take it. I wanted to run. But I took it. It was heavy. "You have 20 days to respond," she said. She walked past me to her car. I went inside and locked the door. I sat on the floor of the entryway and tore open the envelope. It was a lawsuit. Plaintiff Celeste Evans. Defendant Kennedy Evans. I flipped through the pages. The legal jargon was dense, but the accusations jumped out at me like slaps to the face. Count 1, undue influence. The defendant, acting in a position of trust, did coerce the deceased into altering estate planning documents during a period of diminished mental capacity. Count 2, financial mismanagement. The defendant misappropriated funds designated for the care of the deceased for personal use. Count 3, concealment of assets. The defendant has knowingly hidden or obscured the existence of the Evans Family Foundation and its assets. I felt sick, physically sick. Financial mismanagement. I had bought generic toilet paper to save money. I had canceled the cable subscription he wasn't using. I had eaten ramen noodles for lunch so I wouldn't have to dip into the grocery budget. And concealment, I hadn't known the foundation existed until this morning. Celeste wasn't just suing me, she was destroying me. She was painting a portrait of a predator, a daughter who preyed on her dying father. I needed a lawyer. Mr. Mercer was out. He was the estate attorney. He couldn't represent me if the estate was being contested, and frankly, after the lie about the key, I didn't trust him. I opened the phone book. Yes, Briar Hollow still had phone books. I skipped the full-page ads for the big injury firms. I looked for someone small, someone who looked like they needed the work. I found a half-inch ad. Ethan Rourke. Civil litigation, wills and trusts. His office was on the second floor of a building above a dry cleaner. The hallway smelled of chemicals and steam. I knocked on the frosted glass door. "Come in," a voice yelled. I entered. The office was a disaster. Files were stacked on the floor. Books were piled on the chairs. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he hadn't slept in 2 days. He was young, maybe 35, with messy brown hair and a tie that was loosened at the collar. "Ethan Rourke," I asked. "That is me," he said. He stood up and cleared a stack of papers off a chair. "Please, have a seat. Sorry about the mess. I'm in the middle of a class action against a landlord." I sat down. I put the envelope from Marianne Voss on his desk. "My sister is suing me." I said, He looked at the return address on the envelope. Voss and Associates. Ouch, he said. Marianne Voss. She doesn't play nice. He opened the file and started reading. His eyebrows went up. Undue influence, he muttered. Mismanagement. Concealment. They are throwing the kitchen sink at you. Is it bad? I asked. He looked at me. Is any of it true? No, I said. None of it. I took care of him. I saved every receipt. He nodded. That is good. But Kennedy, I need you to understand something. In civil court, truth is a secondary character. The main character is the story. He tapped the paper. Marianne is telling a story here. The story is that you are the bitter, unsuccessful sister who took advantage of a senile old man to get rich. It is a classic trope. Juries eat it up because it confirms their suspicions about human nature. So what do we do? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. We tell a better story, but be warned, they are going to use shame tactics. They will subpoena your bank records, your emails, your medical records. They will try to find anything embarrassing and put it in the public record to make you settle. I have nothing to hide. I said, everyone has something they don't want read out loud in a courtroom. He said, I thought of the USB drive in my bra. I thought of the letter. I hired him. His retainer was $2,000. It was half of my savings. 2 days later, my debit card was declined at the grocery store. I was trying to buy milk and eggs. The cashier, a girl named Sarah, who I had babysat 10 years ago, looked at me with pity. It says, issuer declined. She said quietly, I tried again. Same result. I called the bank from the parking lot. I am sorry. Ms. Evans, the customer service representative said, there is a freeze on your accounts. A freeze, why? It is a court order, she said, pending litigation regarding the Evans estate. I called Ethan. He sounded tired. She filed an emergency petition, he said. She claimed you are a flight risk. A flight risk, I shouted. I have $300 to my name. I can't afford a bus ticket to Memphis, let alone a flight. It doesn't matter, Ethan said. She argued that since you are a beneficiary of a shadowy offshore trust, that is how she described the foundation you have access to unlimited funds and might flee the jurisdiction. The judge granted a temporary hold. I hung up. I sat in the parking lot and cried. Not because I was sad, but because I was angry. Celeste knew I had no money. She knew I lived paycheck to paycheck. This wasn't about stopping me from fleeing. This was about starving me out. The preliminary hearing was set for Tuesday. The county courthouse was a grand old building with high ceilings and wooden benches that made your back ache. I sat next to Ethan. Celeste sat at the other table, next to Marianne Voss. Celeste looked impeccable. She wore a navy suit and pearls. She looked like the grieving, responsible daughter. Marianne Voss stood up. Your Honor, she began, we are here to prevent the dissipation of assets. The defendant, Kennedy Evans, has already demonstrated a pattern of manipulation. She picked up a stack of papers. We have text messages. Your Honor, recovered from the deceased's phone, she handed a copy to the bailiff, who brought it to the judge. Ethan leaned over. Do you know what these are? I looked at the copy he had been given. It was a screenshot of a text chain. Me. You have to sign the papers. Dad. Just do it. I need you to do this for me. Dad. I am tired. Kennedy. I don't understand them. Me. It doesn't matter if you understand. Just sign them. I can't keep doing this if you don't. The courtroom went silent. It sounded damning. It sounded like elder abuse. I gasped. That is not what that was. Ethan put a hand on my arm. Quiet. I remembered that conversation. It was from 6 months ago. The papers were the insurance forms for his physical therapy. If he didn't sign them, the insurance wouldn't pay, and the therapist wouldn't come. He was tired because it was late. I said I couldn't keep doing this fighting the insurance company if he didn't help me. But the timestamp was gone. The context was gone. Ms. Voss, the judge said, looking over his glasses, this is concerning. It is, Your Honor, Marianne said smoothly. We believe this refers to the creation of the Evans Family Foundation and the transfer of assets. It was a lie, a perfectly constructed lie. The judge looked at me. His eyes were cold. "I am upholding the freeze," he said, "and I am ordering a full forensic accounting of the defendant's finances." I felt like I had been punched. The hearing ended. I walked out of the courtroom, my legs feeling like jelly. Ethan was talking to me, telling me it was just a preliminary motion, that we would get the metadata, but I could barely hear him. I needed to wash my face. I walked into the women's restroom in the hallway. I stopped. Celeste was there. She was standing at the sink, gripping the porcelain with both hands. Her head was bowed. She was sobbing. It wasn't the pretty, delicate crying she had done at the funeral. This was an ugly, guttural sound. Her shoulders were shaking violently. She sounded like she was in physical pain. I stood there, frozen. For a second, I forgot everything. I forgot the lawsuit. I forgot the frozen bank account. I just saw my big sister, the one who used to braid my hair, breaking down. "Celeste," I whispered. The sound of my voice made her snap upright. She spun around. Her face was ravaged. Her mascara was running. Her eyes were red and wild. For 1 second, just one heartbeat, I saw the vulnerability. I saw the terror. She looked like a little girl who was lost. Then she saw it was me. The change was instantaneous. It was like watching a steel shutter slam down. She wiped her face with the back of her hand. She stood up straighter. The grief vanished, replaced by a cold, hard hatred. She glared at me. Her eyes burned. "You," she hissed. "Celeste, are you okay?" I asked. "Do not talk to me." She spat. She walked toward me, forcing me to step back. "You made me do this," she said. Her voice was low and trembling with rage. "You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to drag our family through the mud?" "You are the one suing me," I cried. "Because you stole him," she screamed. The sound echoed off the tile walls. "You stole him from me. You were there, day after day, whispering in his ear, making him love you more. You think I don't know? I was taking care of him," I shouted back. "Where were you? I was being the daughter he wanted," she yelled. "The successful one. The one who married well. I did everything he ever asked me to do. And in the end, he gave you the key." She stopped. She realized she had said too much. "The key?" I asked. "You know about the key." She stepped back. Her mask was back in place. She smoothed her skirt. "You are going to lose. Kennedy, I have the money, I have the lawyers, and I have the truth, or at least, the version of it that people will believe." She walked past me, bumping my shoulder hard. I watched her go. She knew about the key. She knew about the foundation, and she was terrified. She wasn't crying because she missed our father. She was crying because she was scared. What was in that foundation that made my wealthy, powerful sister shake with fear? I touched the spot on my chest where the USB drive was hidden. I needed to find out, and I knew I couldn't do it in Briar Hollow. The computer shop guy had been scared. The banker had been scared. Celeste was scared. I walked out of the bathroom. Ethan was waiting for me. "Ethan," I said, "yeah, we need to find out what Garnet River Holdings is, and we need to do it without anyone in this town knowing." He looked at me. The defeated look was gone from my face. "Okay," he said. "How I don't know yet." I said, "But my father left me a map, and I am going to follow it." Ethan Rourke knew a guy. In a town like Briar Hollow, lawyers like Ethan, the ones who operated above dry cleaners and took cases on contingency, always knew a guy. This particular contact was a forensic data specialist named Marcus, who worked out of a basement apartment that smelled of cat litter and high-end server coolant. We sat in Marcus's living room on a Wednesday morning, the rain tapping a relentless rhythm against the garden-level window. Marcus did not look like a hacker from a movie. He looked like a weary accountant, wearing a beige cardigan and sipping herbal tea. He held the gray USB drive with the reverence one might show a live grenade. "The encryption is standard," Marcus said, his fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard that clattered like gunfire. "But it is layered. Your father did not just password protect this. He partitioned the drive so that if you plug it into a Windows machine without the right key, it looks empty. Can you open it?" I asked. Marcus hit the enter key with a flourish. "Done," he said. The monitor on the wall flickered, and a file directory appeared. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like walking into my father's study again, seeing the ghost of his organization, his mind laid out in folders and subfolders. There were 3 main folders: scans, audio, and ledgers. "Open the ledgers," Ethan said. Leaning forward, Marcus clicked. A spreadsheet opened. It was a complex document, columns stretching out to the right, tracking years of financial movement. I squinted at the screen. The numbers were staggering. $200,000 here, $500,000 there. "Look at the payee," Ethan said, pointing to the screen. I followed his finger. In the column marked recipient, the same name appeared over and over again, interspersed with legitimate charities like the Red Cross or the local hospital. Garnet River Holdings. "What is Garnet River Holdings?" I asked. "I have never heard of it." Ethan said, "And I know every major player in this county." Marcus scrolled down. The payments to Garnet River Holdings accelerated in the last year. $50,000 a month, then $75,000, then 2 months before my father died. A single transfer of $300,000. That is a lot of money for a charitable foundation to be moving to a holding company. Ethan muttered, "Go to the audio files." I said, "I need to hear him." Marcus navigated back and opened the folder. There were 5 files. They were labeled simply by date. I pointed to the one dated August 12th. "Play it," I whispered. The room went silent, save for the hum of the computer fans. Then, a burst of static, and my father's voice filled the room. "It is August 12th. The pressure is getting worse." His voice sounded tired. It lacked the booming resonance he used to have when he commanded a boardroom. It was the voice of the man I had nursed thin, raspy, but lucid. I told him I would not authorize the expansion. The foundation was never meant to be a vehicle for this kind of exposure. He sat in my living room and told me that legacy is a fragile thing. It felt like a threat. I fear the foundation has become leverage. I trust him, or I did. But now I see that he is serving a different master. I cannot go to the police. Not yet. If I blow the whistle, the whole house of cards comes down on the girls. The recording ended with a sharp click. I stared at the speakers. The girls, me and Celeste. He was protecting us. I said, my voice shaking. Ethan rubbed his chin. "Who is he?" "He never names him. He says someone he once trusted." I said, "That could be anyone. Mr. Mercer, a business partner. Or someone closer," Ethan said darkly. He stood up and paced the small room. "Kennedy, this changes the landscape. If the Evans Family Foundation is a registered 501c3 charitable organization, it is subject to strict federal and state oversight. You cannot just funnel money into a private holding company without a clear charitable purpose. If Garnet River Holdings is a shell company, this is embezzlement or money laundering. And if Celeste is involved," I asked. Ethan stopped pacing. "If Celeste is the president of the board, which the filings say she is, then she is liable. But listen to me carefully." He grabbed the back of a chair and looked me in the eye. "You cannot walk into court and accuse your sister of money laundering based on a voice memo and a spreadsheet. We need to know what Garnet River is. We need to know where that money went. If we accuse her without airtight proof, the judge will see it as a desperate attempt to smear her. It will destroy your credibility. You will look like the greedy, vindictive sister she is painting you to be." "I understand." I said, "Do you?" Ethan pressed, "Because once we pull this thread, the whole sweater unravels. If there is criminal activity here, the foundation's assets could be frozen by the state. There might be nothing left to inherit. I don't care about the money." I said, "I want to know why my father died scared." Ethan nodded. "Okay, then we investigate. But we do it quietly." I left Marcus's apartment with a copy of the files on a new, encrypted drive. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a bruised purple. I needed to talk to Celeste. It was a naive thought, perhaps, but hearing my father's voice, hearing him worry about the girls, had cracked something open in me. He had been trying to protect both of us. Did Celeste know that, or was she so blinded by her narrative of abandonment that she couldn't see the danger she was in? I texted her. I need to speak to you. Not about the lawsuit, about Dad. Please, meet me at Centennial Park. 4 o'clock. I didn't expect her to reply. But 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Fine. 10 minutes. I drove to the park. It was a neutral ground, a place where we had played on the swing sets as children. I sat on a bench near the duck pond, watching the water ripple in the wind. I rehearsed what I would say. I would tell her I missed her. I would tell her I was scared. I would ask her to just stop the legal machinery for 1 hour so we could be sisters. I saw her car approach. It was a silver Mercedes, gleaming even under the overcast sky. She parked and got out. She was wearing a trench coat belted tightly at the waist. She looked glamorous and severe. But she wasn't alone. The passenger door opened, and Marianne Voss stepped out. My heart sank. Marianne was wearing her trademark power suit and carrying a notepad. They walked toward me. Celeste did not look at me. She looked at a point just past my left ear. I stood up. Celeste, I said, I asked to speak to you. Privately. I do not speak to you without representation. Celeste said. Her voice was flat. Rehearsed. Marianne smiled. A shark baring teeth. My client is here as a courtesy. Ms. Evans, Marianne said, but given the pending litigation, any conversation must be witnessed. I looked at Celeste. I tried to find the sister who used to let me sleep in her bed during thunderstorms. Celeste, I said, ignoring Marianne. I found a recording of Dad. Celeste's eyes flickered to mine. A recording. He was scared. Celeste, he was talking about the foundation. He said he was being pressured. He said he was worried about us. Celeste's face hardened. She crossed her arms. Dad was confused. Kennedy? He had a stroke. He was paranoid. He sounded lucid. I insisted. He sounded like himself. He was worried about Garnet River Holdings. The reaction was microscopic, but it was there. Celeste's pupil dilated, a tiny twitch at the corner of her mouth. She knew the name. I do not know what that is, Celeste said. Marianne stepped between us. Ms. Evans, if you are attempting to introduce evidence, you should do so through the proper discovery channels. Ambushing my client with vague allegations about the ramblings of a sick man is harassment. I am not ambushing her, I shouted, my frustration boiling over. I am trying to save her. If there is something wrong with the foundation, we are both in trouble. There is nothing wrong with the foundation, Celeste snapped. She stepped around Marianne, getting in my face. The only thing wrong is that you cannot accept that he didn't trust you with it. He didn't trust me. I laughed. A bitter, sharp sound. He left me the key. Celeste. He left me the map. Celeste's face went pale. We are done here, Marianne said, grabbing Celeste's arm. Celeste let herself be pulled away. But before she turned, she looked at me. The anger was there. Yes, but beneath it, looking out from behind the fortress of her makeup, was pure panic. I watched them drive away. I realized then that the sister I was looking for was gone. She was buried under layers of resentment and fear. I couldn't save her by talking. I had to save her by finding the truth, even if it destroyed the life she had built. The next morning, I went hunting for Garnet River Holdings. The address on the spreadsheet was for an office park on the outskirts of the city, near the airport. It was a soulless stretch of concrete and glass, called the Meridian Business Center. I drove my sedan into the lot. The building for Garnet River was a 2-story gray box. The directory in the lobby was a slat board with white plastic letters. Suite 205, Garnet River Holdings. I walked up the stairs. The hallway smelled of industrial carpet cleaner. I found Suite 205. The door was glass, but the blinds were drawn. I knocked. No answer. I tried the handle. It was locked. I knocked again. Harder. The door to the neighboring office opened. A young woman with a headset around her neck poked her head out. Are you looking for someone? She asked. Yes, I said. Garnet River Holdings. She frowned. Oh, I think they are gone. Gone. Yeah, there was a guy there for a few months, but I haven't seen him in weeks. The landlord was here yesterday scraping the name off the mailbox downstairs. Did you ever see the manager? I asked. Once or twice. She said, older guy? Always wore a suit. He didn't talk much. I felt a chill. Did he have a name? I think the mail was addressed to a Mr. Marlowe or Martin. Something with an M, Sebastian Marlowe, the name from the security card in my father's coat. Thank you, I said. I went back to the lobby. The mailbox for Unit 205 was indeed blank. I peered through the slot. Empty. It was a ghost ship. A shell company set up to receive money and then vanish. My phone rang. It was an unknown number. Usually, I let those go to voicemail, assuming it was a reporter or a bill collector, but something made me answer. Hello? Is this Kennedy Evans? The voice was female, whisper quiet, and trembling. Yes, this is Kennedy. You don't know me, the voice said. But I know you. I saw you at the courthouse. Who is this? I asked, walking out to my car. My name is Lena Hart. I used to do the books for the Evans Family Foundation. I froze, my hand on the car door handle. Lena, I said, I would love to talk to you. Not on the phone, she said quickly. Do you know the diner off Highway 9, the 24 stop? Yes. Meet me there. Tonight, 8 o'clock. Come alone. Please. She hung up. I spent the rest of the day in a state of nervous energy. I told Ethan. He wasn't happy about me going alone, but he agreed we needed the lead. Be careful, he said. If these people are laundering money, they are not going to be polite about loose ends. The 24 stop was a chrome and neon relic that catered to truckers and insomniacs. At 8 o'clock, it was half full. I spotted her immediately. She was sitting in a booth in the back corner, wearing a hooded sweatshirt and stirring a cup of coffee with aggressive intensity. She looked to be in her 40s, with tired eyes and hands that wouldn't stop moving. I slid into the booth opposite her. Lena, I asked. She jumped, spilling a little coffee. She looked around the diner before meeting my eyes. You look like him, she said softly. Your dad. Thank you for meeting me. I said. I shouldn't be here, she said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a pack of cigarettes, then remembered you couldn't smoke inside and shoved them back. I signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. If they find out I'm talking to you, they will sue me. They told me I would lose my CPA license. Who told you that Marianne Voss? She said. And the others? The others? The board. She said, Lena, tell me what happened. Why did you quit? She took a sip of coffee. Her hand was shaking so much the cup clattered against the saucer. I was the bookkeeper for 5 years. It was normal stuff. Grants to the library, scholarships. Then, about 18 months ago, the directives started changing. They wanted me to route payments through vendors I had never heard of. Consulting fees, advisory retainers. Garnet River Holdings, I asked. She flinched. You know the name. I saw the ledger. Lena nodded rapidly. Yes, that was the big one. I asked questions. I asked for invoices. You can't just send 50 grand to a company without an invoice. They told me to stop asking what the money was for. They said it was strategic allocation. Who told you the chairman of the board called me directly? He said if I wanted to keep my pension, I would cut the checks. Who is the chairman? I asked. She shook her head. It doesn't matter. What matters is what happened in October. October. I repeated. Just before he died. Grant came to a meeting. She said he had been sick. He hadn't been to a meeting in months, but he came to this one. He was in a wheelchair. He looked terrible, but he was angry. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. He tried to stop a transfer, a big one, $300,000. He told them it was reckless. He told them he wouldn't allow the foundation to be used as a slush fund. What happened? They overrode him. She said, they used a bypass clause in the bylaws. They claimed he was mentally incapacitated and that his vote didn't count. My stomach turned. They stripped him of his power in his own foundation. Who was there? Lena. Who voted against him? She looked down at the table. Your sister. She said, I felt the air leave my lungs. Celeste. She was there. Lena said. She sat right next to the lawyer. When the vote came to override your father, she didn't say anything. She just raised her hand. I closed my eyes. I could see it. Celeste, polished and cold, raising her hand to silence our dying father. She was crying, though, Lena added, while she did it, tears were running down her face, but she kept her hand up. That sounds like Celeste, I said bitterly. The performance of grief while twisting the knife, after the meeting. Lena continued. Grant tried to take the minute book. He wanted the record. They wouldn't let him have it. That was when I quit. I couldn't watch it anymore. I handed in my keys the next day. Lena, will you testify, I asked. Will you tell a judge this? She recoiled. No, no way. Kennedy, you don't understand. These aren't just greedy people. They are powerful people. Voss is just the mouthpiece. There are judges, council members. It is a network. If I speak up, I am done. Then why tell me? Because I liked your dad, she said. And because I know they are blaming you. I saw the news. I saw what Celeste is saying. It isn't right. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a napkin. She had written a name on it. This is the only other thing I know, she said, sliding the napkin across the table. When the payments go to Garnet River, they don't stay there. I saw one bank statement before they locked me out of the digital files. The money moves to an account listed under this name. I looked at the napkin. S. Marlowe. He is the bottleneck, she said. Find him, and you find the money. She stood up, throwing a $5 bill on the table. Don't contact me again, she said. Please. She hurried out of the diner, disappearing into the night. I sat there for a long time, staring at the name on the napkin. Sebastian Marlowe. He was the man in the empty office. He was the name on the security card. He was the end of the money trail. Something shifted in me then. For weeks, my internal monologue had been a defensive crouch. How do I prove I am innocent? How do I prove I didn't steal? How do I make them stop? It was the wrong question. I wasn't the defendant. Not really. I was the witness they hadn't managed to silence yet. I picked up the napkin and shredded it into tiny pieces, dropping them into my cold coffee. I didn't need the paper. I had the name burned into my mind. The question wasn't, how do I prove I'm not a villain? The question was, who benefits from everyone believing I am? Celeste benefits because she gets the money. But she was crying when she voted. She was scared, so she was being pressured too. Who benefits from pressuring Celeste? Who benefits from a charitable foundation moving millions of dollars into the dark? I stood up. I felt calm. It was a cold, dangerous calm. I wasn't Kennedy the quiet sister anymore. I was the daughter of Grant Evans, and I was going to burn their house down. I paid the check and walked out to the parking lot. The wind had picked up, whipping my hair across my face. I walked toward my car, fishing for my keys. I stopped 10 feet away. The passenger side window of my rental was shattered. The safety glass lay in glittering cubes on the asphalt, like diamonds on black velvet. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I walked to the door and looked inside. The glove box was open, its contents dumped onto the floor mat. The center console was ripped open. Papers were scattered everywhere, insurance registration, the car manual, fast food napkins. I leaned in. My cheap sunglasses were still there. The charging cable for my phone was still there. The emergency $20 bill I kept in the ashtray was still there. But the envelope I had foolishly left under the seat, the one containing the copy of the Memorandum of Wishes, was gone. I stood up and looked around the dark parking lot. The highway hummed in the distance. There were no other cars nearby. They had followed me, or they had tracked me. They wanted the document. They wanted to know what my father had told me. A shiver went down my spine. But it wasn't fear. It was adrenaline. They had broken into my car to steal a piece of paper. That meant the paper mattered. That meant they were afraid of me. I took my phone out and snapped a picture of the broken window. Then I got in the car, brushing the glass off the driver's seat. I started the engine. The wind roared through the broken window, cold and loud. Let them come, I thought. I put the car in gear and drove back toward Briar Hollow. I had a name to find, and I was done hiding. The war for my reputation was being fought in paper. It was a blizzard of filings, motions, and counter-motions that piled up on Ethan Rourke's messy desk like snowdrifts. "We are going on the offensive," Ethan said. He slapped a document down in front of me. "This is a motion to compel. We are demanding the full metadata for every text message and email Celeste submitted. We want the device logs. We want to know when those screenshots were taken, who took them, and what software was used to crop them." He looked energized. The break-in at the diner parking lot had scared him, yes, but it had also pissed him off. Ethan was a strip mall lawyer, but he had a streak of stubborn pride that did not take kindly to intimidation tactics. "If they have nothing to hide," he said, "they will hand it over. If they fight it, they look guilty." They fought it. 2 days later, Marianne Voss responded. She did not just object to our motion. She filed a cross motion that felt like a physical blow. I sat in Ethan's office, reading the document, my hands trembling with a rage I could barely contain. Motion for discovery of medical and counseling records. The plaintiff requests full access to the defendant's mental health records for the past 5 years to assess mental fitness and stability, given the defendant's erratic behavior and claims of conspiracy. The plaintiff asserts that the defendant may be suffering from delusional episodes that compromise her ability to serve as a trustee. "They want my therapy records," I asked, my voice tight. Ethan rubbed his temples. "It is a standard dirty trick. Kennedy, they are trying to paint you as unstable. If you saw a counselor after your mother died, they will use it. If you took antidepressants during your father's illness, they will say you were medicated and unreliable." "I did see a counselor," I said. "I saw a doctor. Evan's no relation for 6 months when the caretaking got too heavy. I talked about how hard it was. I talked about how I felt invisible. And they will take those words and twist them until invisible sounds like paranoid," Ethan said. I felt a hot flush of shame crawl up my neck. Those sessions were the only safe place I had. They were the only place I could say, "I hate this," without being judged. Now, Marianne Voss wanted to read them aloud in court. She wanted Celeste to read them. It felt like being stripped naked in the town square. "I want to fight this," I said. "We will." Ethan promised. "We will argue relevance. We will argue privacy. But Kennedy, you need to be prepared. They are not trying to win on the law right now. They are trying to break you. They want you to feel so exposed and humiliated that you sign a settlement just to make it stop." I looked at the window, at the gray sky over Briar Hollow. "They don't know me," I said quietly. "They think shame will stop me. But I have been the invisible sister for 30 years. I am used to people looking right through me." I stood up, filed the objection. "Ethan, and keep pushing for that metadata. I am not settling." I went back to the rental house and decided that if I was going to be accused of being crazy, I might as well organize my delusions properly. I went to the office supply store and bought a roll of butcher paper and a pack of markers. I taped the paper to the living room wall, covering the floral wallpaper my landlord loved. I started building a timeline. I wrote down everything. The dates of the wire transfers from the USB drive. The date of the board meeting Lena Hart told me about. The date my father died. The date Celeste filed the lawsuit. I marked the gaps. I marked the silences. Then I put on my headphones and listened to the voice memos again. I had listened to them before, but only for the emotion. I had listened to hear his voice. Now, I listened like a detective. August 12th. He said, "The pressure is getting worse." I wrote August 12th on the wall. Pressure. I played the next one. September 5th. I fear the foundation has become leverage. I wrote September 5th. Leverage. I listened to every pause, every intake of breath. My father was a deliberate speaker. He chose his words like he chose his ties carefully. There was one phrase he repeated in 3 different memos. It was a variation on a theme, but the core message was always the same. If this goes to court, the wrong story will win unless you bring the right person. I wrote it in red marker in the center of the timeline. Bring the right person. Who was the right person? Was it Lena? She was too scared. Was it me? I was the defendant. Nobody believed me. It had to be someone else, someone who knew the whole story. Marlowe, the name on Lena's napkin, the name of the ghost in the empty office. I needed to find him. But how do you find a man who exists only as an initial and a rumor? I decided to search the one place the police, the lawyers, and Celeste hadn't touched since the funeral: the donation pile. My father had a closet full of old coats, wool trenches, rain slickers, heavy tweed jackets he hadn't worn in years. I had boxed them up the week after the funeral, intending to drop them at the shelter, but in the chaos of the lawsuit, the boxes were still sitting in the garage of the main house. I drove over there. The house was locked, but I still had my key. The locks hadn't been changed yet. Celeste's lawyer probably told her that locking me out completely would look bad before a judge. I let myself into the garage. It smelled of gasoline and dust. The boxes were stacked in the corner. I opened the one marked winter coats. I started going through them. I checked every pocket. It was a habit my father had instilled in me: always check the pockets before dry cleaning. He used to leave cash, receipts, mints. I found a crumpled tissue. I found 3 quarters. I found a movie ticket stub from 2010. Then I pulled out his heavy charcoal overcoat, the one he wore to funerals and board meetings. I reached into the inside breast pocket. My fingers brushed against something stiff. I pulled it out. At first glance, it looked like a dry cleaning tag. It was a small, rectangular piece of cardstock, stapled to a plastic loop. But when I turned it over, it wasn't a claim ticket. It was a business card, but not a normal one. It was thick, matte black, with silver embossed lettering. Blackridge Risk Solutions, Crisis Management Strategic Intelligence. There was a phone number. No address, no website. On the back, handwritten in blue ink, was a single name: S. Marlowe. My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't just a name Lena remembered. This was a contact my father had kept close to his chest. Literally. I took the card and left the garage. I didn't want to make the call from the house. I drove to a park on the other side of town. I sat on a bench, the cold wind biting through my sweater. I dialed the number. It rang twice. Blackridge. A woman's voice answered, crisp, professional, cold. "Hello," I said. "I am calling regarding a card I found. It belonged to my father, Grant Evans." There was a pause. A keyboard clattered in the background. "We have no client by that name in our system." "Ma'am," she said, "he might not be a client." I said, "He might have been a subject or a contact. We do not give out information about our operations." She said, "Have a good day." "Wait," I said quickly. "The name on the back of the card is S. Marlowe. I need to speak to Sebastian Marlowe." The line went dead instantly. She didn't say he's not here. She didn't say wrong number. She hung up. I stared at the phone. A receptionist at a risk management firm does not hang up on a potential lead unless the name mentioned is radioactive. I had hit a nerve. I saved the number in my contacts as do not call. I needed Ethan to subpoena the phone records associated with that number. My phone buzzed in my hand. It was Celeste. I almost didn't answer, but then I thought about the game we were playing. If I ignored her, I was the hostile sister. If I answered, I was the cooperative one. "Hello? Celeste. Kennedy," she said. Her voice was soft. It sounded like the voice she used when we were teenagers and she wanted to borrow my car. "What do you want?" "Celeste, I want to stop this fighting," she said. "I hate it. I hate what it is doing to us. You are the one suing me." I reminded her. "I know," she said, her voice catching. "And maybe I was hasty. Look, I am having a small lunch on Sunday. Just family. I want you to come. We can talk. No lawyers. Just us." I hesitated. It smelled like a trap. But it was also an opportunity. If she was cracking, maybe I could get her to admit something. "Who will be there?" I asked. "Just Aunt Beatrice and Cousin Tom," she said. "Please, Kennedy, for Daddy Fine," I said. "I will be there." Sunday lunch was at the Gilded Lily, the most pretentious restaurant in Briar Hollow. It was the kind of place where the napkins were linen and the waiters wore white gloves. I arrived 5 minutes late on purpose. I wore the same simple black dress I had worn to the funeral. I walked to the private dining room in the back. Celeste was there. So were Aunt Beatrice and Cousin Tom. But there was someone else, sitting at the head of the table, his hands folded piously over a plate of untouched bread rolls. Was Pastor Miller. He was the senior pastor of the First Baptist Church, the man who had baptized both of us. He was a man of immense influence in Briar Hollow. It was an ambush, Kennedy Celeste cried. Standing up, she looked radiant in a cream-colored suit. She rushed over and hugged me. I stood stiffly in her arms. I am so glad you came, she whispered. She led me to a chair. It was positioned so that I was facing the pastor, with the family flanking me. It felt like an intervention. We were just praying for you. Kennedy, Aunt Beatrice said, patting my hand. She looked at me with watery, tragic eyes, praying for what I asked, unfolding my napkin. For peace. Pastor Miller said. His voice was deep and rolling. For healing. He looked at me with a heavy, paternal disappointment. Kennedy, he said, Celeste has shared with us the difficulties you have been facing. The confusion. Confusion, I asked. Celeste sighed. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her grip was tight. I told them about the money. Kennedy, I told them how you felt you were entitled to more, and I want you to know, I forgive you. The room went silent. The waiters froze. You forgive me, I repeated. Yes, she said, tears welling up in her eyes on command. I know you were under a lot of stress. I know Daddy's death broke something in you. Money does terrible things to people, but we are family. If you just drop this resistance, if you just admit that you made a mistake with the accounts, we can handle this privately. We don't need the courts. I looked around the table. Aunt Beatrice was nodding encouragingly. Cousin Tom looked at his shoes. Pastor Miller looked at me like I was a lost sheep that needed to be sheared. She had brought them here to witness her benevolence. She was offering me a way out confessed to being a thief and a manipulator, and she would graciously not destroy me publicly. She would lock me away in the box of troubled sister and keep the money and the secrets. It was a masterclass in social violence. Pastor Miller cleared his throat. Kennedy, Scripture tells us that the love of money is the root of all evil, but confession is the root of redemption. Celeste is offering you grace. I looked at Celeste. I really looked at her. She wasn't smirking. She wasn't winking. She looked earnest. She looked heartbroken. And that was when I realized the most terrifying thing of all. She believed it. She had told herself this story that I was the villain, that she was the victim, that she was saving the family legacy so many times that it had become her truth. She had rewritten reality to survive her own guilt. If I yelled, she would win. If I argued, I would look unstable. So I did the only thing I could do. I stood up. I pulled my hand from hers. Kennedy, Aunt Beatrice asked. I didn't say a word. I picked up my purse. Kennedy, please, Celeste said, her voice rising in pitch. Don't run away again. We are trying to help you. I looked at her one last time. I looked at her with zero anger and absolute pity. Then I turned and walked out. I walked through the silent restaurant. I walked out the front door. I got into my car. And then I screamed. It was a raw, animal sound that tore at my throat. I slammed my hands against the steering wheel until my palms burned. I cried for 10 minutes. I cried because I had lost my sister. She wasn't just on the other side of a lawsuit. She was on the other side of reality. She was gone, and I was alone. The next morning, I went to Ethan's office. I looked like I hadn't slept, because I hadn't. We need to talk about Marianne Voss. Ethan said. He didn't ask about the lunch. He took one look at my face and knew. What about her, I asked, pouring myself a cup of his terrible coffee. I was digging into the Foundation's history. Looking for anything on Garnet River. I didn't find that. But I found an old docket number from 5 years ago. A regulatory inquiry from the State Attorney General's office. About what misclassification of assets. Ethan said, it was sealed. But I found the appearance sheet. Do you know who represented the Evans Family Foundation? Marianne Voss, I guessed. Ethan nodded. But here's the kicker. Marianne Voss was not just the lawyer. She was listed as the assistant secretary of the board for that year. My eyes widened. She was on the board briefly, Ethan said. She resigned after the inquiry was closed. But Kennedy, this is a massive conflict of interest. She is representing Celeste in a suit involving a foundation she used to be an officer of. She could be called as a witness. She can't be the litigator. Can we get her thrown off the case, I asked. I filed a motion to disqualify this morning, Ethan said, grinning wolfishly. The judge heard the motion that afternoon. Judge Calder Wynne was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He sat on the bench with an air of supreme boredom. Mr. Rourke, the judge said, you are alleging that Ms. Voss has a conflict. She was a fiduciary for the entity at the center of this dispute. Your Honor, Ethan argued, she has personal knowledge of the foundation's inner workings. She is a potential witness. Marianne Voss stood up. She looked unruffled. Your Honor, my service on the board was limited to a 6-month period 5 years ago. It has no bearing on the current allegations of undue influence regarding the decedent's recent will. This is a delay tactic. Judge Wynne looked at the papers. He tapped his pen on the bench. The motion to disqualify is denied. He said, what Ethan said, stunned, Your Honor, denied, Mr. Rourke. However, the judge leaned forward. The court is losing patience with the pace of discovery. I am scheduling an evidentiary hearing for 10 days from now. I want all witness lists and exhibits submitted by Friday. No more delays. If you have evidence of malfeasance, bring it. If not, we are moving to summary judgment. He banged the gavel. 10 days. Ethan whispered as we walked out. We have 10 days to find the gun, the bullets, and the shooter. We need Lena. I said. Ethan stopped in the hallway. Kennedy, no, we have no choice. Ethan, she knows about the vote. She knows Celeste was there. She knows about the override. Ethan sighed. If we put her on the witness list, Voss will depose her. They will destroy her. Not if we get an affidavit first. I said, a sworn statement. I called Lena. She didn't answer. I texted her. The judge gave us 10 days. I need you. Please. She called me back an hour later. Her voice was tight. I can't testify. Kennedy, I told you. Just an affidavit. I pleaded. A written statement. We can file it under seal initially. We can try to protect your identity until the hearing. Will they see my name, she asked. Eventually. Yes, I admitted. I won't lie to you. Lena, they will know. Silence stretched on the line. They will ruin me, she said. I have 2 kids in college. They are ruining me right now. Lena. And they killed my father's spirit before he even died. Please, you said you liked him. Do this for him. I heard the click of a lighter. She was smoking. Okay, she said finally. But only because I can't sleep. I see his face every time I close my eyes. I will sign it. But you have to promise me you won't release it until the very last second. Give me time to prepare. I promise, I said. I hung up. I felt a wave of nausea. I was doing exactly what I hated using people. I was risking Lena's livelihood to save my own. Was I any better than Celeste? I drove home. The mailbox at the curb was full. I pulled out the bills and junk mail. At the bottom of the stack was a stiff, white envelope. It was certified mail. Return receipt requested. I looked at the return address. There was none. Just a postmark, Briar Hollow. November 14th. My father died on November 1st. I looked at the handwriting on the front. Kennedy Evans, 412 Elm Street. It was my father's handwriting, the unmistakable loop of the K, the sharp slant of the E. I stood on the porch, the wind whipping around me. How could he send me a letter 2 weeks after he died? I tore it open. Inside, there was no letter, no personal note. There was a single photocopy of a document. The header was stamped, filed under seal. The document looked like a court order, but heavily redacted. Black bars covered almost everything names, dates, case numbers, but one paragraph was visible. Authorization is hereby granted for the establishment of the covert fiduciary vehicle known as Garnet River Holdings for the purpose of state-sanctioned asset monitoring. State-sanctioned. My father's foundation wasn't laundering money for criminals, it was working for the state. At the bottom of the page, typed on a separate strip of paper that had been taped to the photocopy, was a single sentence. Don't trust the living to protect the dead. I stared at the paper, the world tilted on its axis. My father hadn't been a victim of a scam. He had been a participant in something official, something secret, and Celeste and Marianne Voss were trying to bury it. But who sent this? I looked at the postmark again. November 14th. Someone else was out there. Someone who had access to my father's files. Someone who was watching the lawsuit unfold and had decided to deal me a card. Don't trust the living. I went inside and locked the door. I slid the deadbolt home. I wasn't just fighting my sister anymore. I was fighting the state. And I had 10 days to figure out how to win without disappearing. The conference room at Voss & Associates was designed to make you feel small. The table was a slab of gray marble that looked like a tombstone, and the air conditioning was set to a temperature that made my teeth ache. I sat on one side, flanked by Ethan Rourke. On the other side sat Marianne Voss, a court reporter, and a videographer who was recording every blink I made. This was the deposition. This was where they tried to break me before we ever stepped foot in front of a jury. Marianne Voss didn't yell. She didn't pound the table. She was far more dangerous than that. She asked questions in a soft, reasonable voice that made every answer I gave sound like a confession. "Ms. Evans," she said, glancing at her notes, "you stated that you moved into your father's home on October 12th, 2022. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said, "and shortly after moving in. You changed the locks on the front and back doors." I shifted in my chair. "Yes, my father had lost his keys. We were worried about security." "Worried about security," Marianne repeated. She wrote something down. "Did you provide a copy of these new keys to your sister?" "Celeste." "No." I said, "Why not? She lives in Atlanta." I said, "She hadn't visited in 6 months. She didn't need a key." "So," Marianne said, looking up with feigned confusion, "you isolated a vulnerable, elderly man in a house where his other daughter could not enter. You created a physical barrier between him and his family." "It wasn't a barrier," I said, my voice rising slightly. "It was a lock. She could have knocked." "She never came to knock." Ethan touched my arm. "Just answer the question." "Kennedy." Marianne smiled thinly. "Let us move on to the medication. You took over the administration of his daily pills." "Correct. He couldn't open the bottles." I said. His hands shook. "So you controlled his intake." Marianne said, "You decided when he took his medicine and how much. Did you have any medical training?" "Ms. Evans, are you a nurse?" "No." I said, "I am a daughter with a significant financial interest in his compliance." Marianne said. "Objection," Ethan said, argumentative. Marianne ignored him. She spent 4 hours dissecting my life. She turned my trips to the pharmacy into suspicious errands. She turned the nights I slept on his floor into excessive monitoring. She made love look like leverage. By the time we walked out into the parking lot, I felt dirty. I felt like I had been peeled open and examined for rot. "They are going to kill me in there," I told Ethan. "They are doing their job," Ethan said grimly. "They are building a narrative. We just have to build a stronger one." But the narrative war was already being lost. 2 days later, at a pre-trial hearing regarding the admissibility of character evidence, Celeste took the stand. She didn't look like the woman who had hissed at me in the funeral home. She looked fragile. She wore a soft blue cardigan and barely any makeup. She spoke to the courtroom like she was confessing sins in a church. "I just wanted to see him." She wept, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. I called every week, but Kennedy, she was always the one who answered. She would tell me he was sleeping, or he was too tired, or he was confused. I felt like I was being walled out. I never got to say goodbye. I never got to tell him I loved him one last time because she wouldn't let me. I sat at the defense table, gripping my pen until the plastic cracked. It was a lie, a beautiful, perfect lie. She hadn't called every week. She had called maybe once a month, usually to ask if the trust distribution was on schedule, but I looked at the jury box empty for now, but soon to be filled with the citizens of Briar Hollow. I looked at the bailiff. I looked at the court clerk. They were all leaning forward. They were all softening. They wanted to believe her. It was emotionally simple. The wealthy, successful sister who had been kept away by the jealous spinster sister. It was a story they understood. It fit the rhythm of a town that loved gossip more than truth. If I tried to explain the reality, the bedpans, the screaming fits, the nights he forgot who I was, it would sound messy. It would sound defensive. Celeste was offering them a tragedy. I was offering them a chore. Ethan leaned over to me. "Don't react," he whispered. "If you roll your eyes, you look heartless." I stared straight ahead, my face a mask, while my sister turned our family history into a weapon. That afternoon, back in Ethan's office, we got our first break. Ethan came in waving a sheaf of papers. He looked like a man who had just found water in a desert. "The metadata came back," he said, "or at least, some of it." I stood up, and Marianne fought hard to suppress this. Ethan said, spreading the papers on his desk. "But the judge ordered a limited release. Look at this." He pointed to a column of data. "These are the text messages Celeste introduced, the ones where you supposedly bullied your father. Look at the last modified timestamp." I looked. October 15th, 2023, 14:30. "Okay," I said. "That is 2 weeks before he died. Now look at the origin device field," Ethan said. I squinted at the technical jargon. "Device ID admin _console_04. What is admin console for?" I asked. "Exactly," Ethan said. "It is not an iPhone. It is not an Android. It is a desktop editing software. These aren't screenshots from a phone." Kennedy. "These are images that were compiled and exported from a central computer. Someone curated these. Someone cut and pasted the dialogue to make it look continuous. Can we prove it?" "We can raise doubt." Ethan said, "We can argue that the chain of custody is broken." We brought it up the next morning. Ethan stood before Judge Wynn and argued that the evidence was manufactured. "Your Honor," he said, his voice ringing in the courtroom, "these exhibits were not extracted from the decedent's phone. They were generated by an external source. We believe they have been altered to mislead the court." Marianne Voss stood up, looking bored. "Your Honor, this is a formatting issue. The images were archived for storage. The content is accurate." Mr. Rourke is grasping at straws. Judge Wynn peered at the documents. He rubbed his forehead. "Mr. Rourke," the judge said, "I will allow you to question the plaintiff about the origin of these images. But let me be clear. I will not turn my courtroom into a theater for conspiracy theories, unless you can prove the text was changed. The exhibits stand. We are here to probate a will, not to investigate a spy novel." He is not listening. I whispered to Ethan as he sat down. He listened enough. Ethan said, "He is letting me ask the question. That is a win." But it didn't feel like a win. It felt like we were throwing pebbles at a tank. I needed to know who was driving the tank. I went to the public library. I needed a computer that wasn't traceable to me, or at least one that felt neutral. I sat in a carrel in the back, surrounded by college students studying for midterms. I typed the name into the search bar. Sebastian Marlowe. Nothing. I tried S. Marlowe Briar Hollow. Nothing. I tried Sebastian Marlowe, State of Tennessee. A hit. It was an archived PDF from 10 years ago. A list of attendees for a state regulatory conference on nonprofit oversight. Sebastian Marlowe, Compliance Officer. State Fiduciary Review Division. I stared at the screen. State Fiduciary Review Division. I opened a new tab and searched for the agency. The website was sparse. It looked like it hadn't been updated since 2005. It listed a generic phone number and a P.O. box in the state capital. Under Mission, it said, "To ensure the integrity of public and private trusts operating within the jurisdiction." I went back to the search for Marlowe. After that conference 10 years ago, he vanished. No LinkedIn profile, no Facebook, no property records. He was a civil servant who had fallen off the map. or he had been moved to a department that didn't publish its directory. Don't trust the living to protect the dead. The letter from my father had said Garnet River Holdings was a covert fiduciary vehicle. Was Marlowe the driver? My phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Get to the office," he said. "The courier just dropped off Lena Hart's affidavit." I drove to the office, my heart racing. This was it. This was the smoking gun. Ethan was sitting at his desk, the affidavit in front of him. He looked pale. "Is it bad?" I asked. He looked up at me. "Kennedy, you need to sit down." I sat. Lena came through. He said, "She detailed everything. The board meeting, the override, the pressure on your father. She confirmed Celeste was there and voted against him." "That is good." "Right?" I asked. "That proves undue influence. Read paragraph 14. Ethan said. He slid the document toward me. I looked at the paper. Lena's signature was jagged at the bottom. Paragraph 14, in attendance at the October meeting, in addition to myself, Grant Evans, Celeste Evans, and Marianne Voss, was the Foundation's external legal advisor, who provided counsel on the bypass clause used to strip Mr. Evans of his voting rights. That advisor was Judge Calder Wynne. The room seemed to tilt. "Judge Wynne," I whispered. "The judge presiding over our case." Ethan said. His voice was hollow. He was there. "He advised them on how to silence your father." I felt a cold numbness spread through my chest. "He isn't just biased," I said. "He is a co-conspirator." Ethan stood up and walked to the window. He looked out at the street below. "This is a disaster," he said. "If we file this, we are accusing a sitting judge of corruption. If we are wrong, or if Lena backtracks, I will be disbarred. You will be held in contempt. But we aren't wrong." I said, "Lena was there. Kennedy, do you understand what this means?" Ethan turned around. "We aren't fighting a lawsuit anymore. We are walking into a trap that was set before your father even died. They assigned the case to Wynne on purpose. They knew he would protect the secret because it is his secret too. So what do?" I asked. "Do we give up?" Ethan looked at me. He looked at the mess on his desk. He looked at the affidavit. "No," he said, "we don't give up, but we have to be surgical. We can't file this publicly yet. If we do, Wynne will seal it and sanction us. So we file a sealed motion for recusal." Ethan said, "We send it directly to him. We attach the affidavit. We tell him, 'We know you were there, recuse yourself,' or we send this to the State Judicial Board." "It is blackmail," I said. "It is leverage." Ethan corrected. "It is the only way to get a fair trial." We filed the motion that afternoon. Filed under seal. We waited. 1 day passed, then 2. Usually, a recusal motion gets a response within 24 hours. It is a hot potato. Judges want to deal with it and move on. But from Judge Wynne's chambers, silence, no denial, no hearing scheduled, just a black hole. On the 3rd day, a bike messenger arrived at Ethan's office. He didn't bring a ruling from the judge. He brought a thick envelope from Voss and Associates. Ethan opened it. He scanned the cover letter. He let out a low whistle. "What is it?" I asked. "A settlement offer," he said. He handed it to me. "Settlement agreement and release." I skipped the legal boilerplate and went to the numbers. The plaintiff, Celeste Evans, agrees to pay the defendant, Kennedy Evans, the sum of $2 million. $2 million. It was enough to buy a house. It was enough to start a business. It was enough to leave Briar Hollow and never look back. But then I read the conditions. Condition 1. The defendant agrees to waive any and all claims to the Northbridge Heritage Trust and the Evans Family Foundation. Condition 2. The defendant agrees to a permanent non-disparagement clause, prohibiting any public or private discussion of the estate, the foundation, or the litigation. Condition 3. The defendant agrees to destroy any and all documents, digital files, or recordings currently in her possession related to the estate. They are terrified. Ethan said softly. "They know we filed the recusal motion. They know we have Lena. This is hush money. Kennedy. And it is a lot of it." I looked at the number. $2 million. I could take it, I could sign the paper, I could walk away, I could let Celeste have her victory, I could let the judge keep his bench, I could let the foundation keep laundering money for the state, or whatever it was doing. I could sleep again. I closed my eyes. I thought about my father. I thought about the way he looked in that casket. Silenced. I thought about the stranger watching my house. I thought about Celeste crying in the bathroom. If I signed this, I wasn't just taking money. I was agreeing that their version of the story was the truth. I was agreeing that I was the villain who had been paid off. I opened my eyes. No. I said, Kennedy. Ethan said, think about it. This ends the risk. If we go to the hearing next week, Wynne could rule against us. He could bury us. You could walk away with nothing. I don't care. I said, and I meant it. The money felt like counterfeit currency. It had no value if it cost me my name. Reject it, I said. Ethan looked at me with a mixture of fear and admiration. You are brave. Kennedy, he said, or you are crazy. Maybe both. I said. We sent the rejection. The atmosphere in Briar Hollow changed after that. It felt tighter, heavier, the night before the final evidentiary hearing. The air was thick with a storm front moving in. I needed groceries. My fridge was empty, and I needed the normalcy of buying milk and bread. I drove to the supermarket. It was 7 o'clock, and the store was crowded. I parked and walked in. The fluorescent lights were jarring. I grabbed a cart. I walked down the cereal aisle. I felt it before I saw it. The prickly sensation on the back of my neck. I turned. A man was standing at the end of the aisle. He was wearing a generic windbreaker and a baseball cap pulled low. He was looking at soup cans, but his body was angled toward me. I turned down the next aisle. I stopped halfway down and pretended to look at pasta sauce. I glanced at the reflection in the glass door of the freezer case opposite me. The man walked past the end of the aisle. He didn't look at the shelves. He looked down the aisle, checked that I was there, and kept walking. I felt a surge of panic. This wasn't the car outside the house. This was up close. I abandoned my cart. I needed people. I needed witnesses. I walked quickly toward the checkout lanes. The man appeared from the produce section. Cutting me off, he wasn't aggressive. He didn't have a weapon drawn. He just stepped into my path. Ms. Evans, he said. His voice was low. I stepped back, bumping into a display of apples. Apples cascaded onto the floor. Don't cause a scene, he said. I just have a message. I looked around. A woman with a baby was staring at me. A cashier was watching. Leave me alone, I said. My voice too loud, too shrill. The man held up his hands. Accept the offer, he said. It is the last exit ramp. Then he turned and walked out of the store. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The woman with the baby looked at me with pity. Are you okay, honey? She asked. I nodded, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I am fine. I thought I knew him. I walked out of the store without my groceries. I got in my car and locked the doors. I wasn't afraid he was going to hurt me, not physically. I was afraid of what had just happened. I had shouted in a grocery store. I had knocked over a display. To the witnesses, I looked unhinged. I looked like a woman cracking under pressure. That was their weapon. They didn't need to kill me. They just needed to make me look paranoid. I drove home, checking my rearview mirror every 10 seconds. When I got inside, I checked every window. I pulled every curtain. I sat on the floor of the living room, in the dark. I had one voice memo left. I had saved it. It was labeled last. I hadn't wanted to listen to it because last sounded so final. It sounded like the end of him, but I was at the end of the line. The hearing was tomorrow at 9 a.m. Judge Wynne was going to preside. Knowing that we knew his secret, Celeste was going to be there. Knowing I had rejected her money, I needed my father. I put on my headphones and pressed play. The silence on the recording was long. For a moment, I thought it was blank. Then, he spoke. Kennedy, if you are listening to this, then the walls have closed in. I am sorry. I never wanted this for you. I wanted to fix it before I died, but the tangled knots were too tight. His voice broke. I heard him take a sip of water. You are wondering why I didn't just go to the police. You are wondering why I played their game. It is because the game is rigged. Honey, the referee is on their payroll. He knew. He knew about the judge, but I made a call. He said, his voice grew stronger. I called in a debt from a long time ago, from before I was a businessman, from when I was something else. I held my breath. You have to hold the line. Kennedy, you have to stand in that courtroom and refuse to break. You have to be the stone that breaks the wave. A man will come, he said. He will come when the court is ready, not when you are. He is the only one who has the authority to open the seal. Trust him, and know that I am proud of you. You were always the strong one. I just forgot to tell you. The recording ended. I sat in the dark, tears streaming down my face. A man will come. It sounded like a fairy tale. It sounded like a desperate hope of a dying man. But I had the business card. S. Marlowe. Was he the man, or was he the enemy? I wiped my face. I stood up. I walked to my closet and pulled out my suit. I hung it on the doorframe. I wasn't going to sleep. I was going to wait for the sun to come up. And then I was going to go to court and look Judge Calder Wynne in the eye. If a man was coming, he better hurry. Because tomorrow, I was walking into the lion's den alone. The courtroom on Tuesday morning felt less like a hall of justice and more like an operating theater where I was the patient. Awake and unanesthetized, every seat in the gallery was filled. The citizens of Briar Hollow had turned out in force, drawn by the smell of blood in the water. They were there to see the final act of the Evans family tragedy, to watch the wealthy sister crush the quiet one, or perhaps to see if the quiet one would finally crack. I sat at the defendant's table, my hands clasped so tightly that my knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. Ethan Rourke sat beside me, surrounded by stacks of files that looked chaotic compared to the pristine, leather-bound binders on Marianne Voss's table. Judge Calder Wynne entered the courtroom at exactly 9 o'clock. The bailiff cried out for all to rise, and we stood. The judge moved with a heavy, irritated energy. He did not look at me. He did not look at Ethan. He adjusted his robe, sat down, and scanned the docket as if he were checking a grocery list he wanted to be done with. Be seated, he grunted. We are here for the final evidentiary hearing in the matter of the estate of Grant Evans. I have reviewed the filings. I have reviewed the motions. I intend to issue a ruling on the validity of the will and the trusteeship by noon. Noon. He gave us 3 hours to dismantle a conspiracy that had been decades in the making. Ethan stood up. His suit was rumpled, but his voice was steady. Your Honor, he began. Before we proceed to closing arguments, the defense has 2 critical evidentiary matters to address. First, the affidavit of Lena Hart, former bookkeeper for the Evans Family Foundation. Second, the metadata analysis regarding the plaintiff's digital exhibits. Judge Wynne sighed. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. Mr. Rourke, he said, we discussed this in chambers. We did not discuss the affidavit. Your Honor, Ethan pressed, this is new testimony. It speaks directly to the issue of undue influence not by my client, but against the decedent. Marianne Voss was on her feet before Ethan finished the sentence. Objection, she said. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the humid air of the room. This affidavit is inadmissible hearsay. The witness is not present to be cross-examined. Mr. Rourke is attempting to introduce a sworn statement from a disgruntled former employee who was terminated for cause years ago. It is prejudicial, it is unverified, and it is a desperate attempt to distract the court from the real issue, Ms. Evans's theft of estate assets. It is not hearsay if it falls under the exception of a declaration against interest, Ethan argued. And if the plaintiff wants to cross-examine her, they can. We can subpoena her. But the court must hear what she saw in that boardroom. The judge looked at the affidavit sitting on his bench. He didn't open it. He pushed it aside with the tip of his finger, as if it were contaminated. The objection is sustained, Judge Wynne said. The affidavit is excluded. Ethan froze. Your Honor? This witness places you counsel. The judge's voice cracked like a whip. You will tread carefully. I have ruled. The affidavit is excluded. If you want to subpoena a witness, you should have done so weeks ago. We are not delaying this trial for a fishing expedition." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. He wasn't going to let it in. He couldn't. Lena's testimony named him as a co-conspirator. He was protecting himself from the bench. Ethan looked at me. His face was pale. He knew, and I knew, that the fix was in "Move to the metadata." Judge Wynn commanded. Ethan gathered himself. He picked up the technical report. "Your Honor, the plaintiff introduced text messages that painted my client as abusive. Our forensic analysis shows these images were not native to the decedent's phone. They were edited, compiled, and exported from a central workstation specifically, a device with the ID Admin Console 4. So Judge Wynn asked. "So," Ethan said, his voice rising, "these are not authentic communications. They are a collage. They are a fabrication designed to mislead this court. Marianne Voss didn't even stand up this time. She just leaned into her microphone. Your Honor, this is tech speak for formatting. The messages were archived. The content is identical to what was on the phone. Ms. Evans is grasping at pixels because she cannot explain why she locked her sister out of the house." I looked at Celeste. She was sitting perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap. She wasn't looking at the judge. She was looking at me. Her expression was terrified. It wasn't the look of a woman who was winning. It was the look of a woman who was waiting for a bomb to go off. Her eyes were wide, darting from me to the doors at the back of the room. There was triumph there. Yes, she was watching me lose, but beneath it was a thick, oily layer of dread. She knew about the judge. She knew about the affidavit. She knew that winning this case meant burying a secret that was rotting from the inside out. "Mr. Rourke," Judge Wynn said, "unless you can produce the original phone to prove the text is different, I am accepting the exhibits, but the plaintiff has the phone," Ethan shouted. "Then you should have requested it in discovery," the judge snapped. "We did." Ethan yelled. They claimed it was lost. Enough. Judge Wynn slammed his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "I am done with the theatrics. The exhibits are admitted. The affidavit is excluded." He leaned forward, his face a mask of stone. "Ms. Evans," he said, looking directly at me, "this court has been very patient with your delays, but patience has limits. You have made wild accusations against your sister. You have alleged conspiracies involving state agencies. You have wasted the court's time." He was reading from a script. I could feel it. He had decided this speech yesterday, or maybe a week ago. The room felt like it was tilting. The floor seemed to slope toward the plaintiff's table, sliding all the luck and power into Marianne Voss's lap. It was the familiar gravity of Briar Hollow, the loud, polished story wins. The quiet, messy truth loses because it takes too long to explain. I looked at the jury box. The jurors looked bored. They looked ready for lunch. They didn't see a conspiracy. They saw a woman in a cheap suit losing an argument. Ethan leaned close to me. "I have to do it," he whispered. "Do what I asked. The nuclear option." Ethan stood up. He squared his shoulders. "Your Honor," Ethan said, his voice trembling slightly, "the defense requests an immediate recess to address the sealed motion filed 3 days ago regarding the recusal of this court." The room went dead silent. The judge went still. His eyes narrowed into slits. "There is no such motion on the docket," the judge said softly. "We filed it under seal." "Your Honor," Ethan said, "based on the affidavit you just excluded, we have evidence that this court has a conflict of interest due to prior advisory roles with the Evans Family Foundation. We cannot proceed until denied." Judge Wynn roared. He didn't just say it. He shouted it. "Your Honor." "You cannot deny a recusal motion without a hearing," Ethan shouted back. "I can, and I am." The judge's face was red. "You are in contempt. Mr. Rourke, you are attempting to intimidate this bench with baseless slander. I am striking the motion. I am striking the affidavit. And I am entering a judgment in favor of the plaintiff." "No," I stood up. "Sit down." "Ms. Evans," the bailiff barked. Stepping toward me, I stood there, shaking. It was over. He was going to rule. He was going to give Celeste everything, the money. the house, the foundation, the records. He was going to hand her the keys to the incinerator so she could burn the evidence, and I would be left with nothing but a record of mental instability and a reputation as a thief. It wasn't a cinematic panic. I didn't scream. I didn't faint. It was a cold, sharp clarity. This is how it happens. This is how you lose your life. Not with a bang, but with a gavel. I looked at Celeste. She had her hand over her mouth. She looked sick. The judge raised the gavel. I am ruling that the Northbridge Heritage Trust be immediately transferred to the control of Celeste Evans, and that the defendant be removed as trustee. Effective immediately. I further order, he never finished the sentence. The double doors at the back of the courtroom didn't just open. They swung wide with a heavy pneumatic hiss that cut through the judge's voice. The sound of footsteps followed. They were not the hurried, scuffing footsteps of a late lawyer. They were slow, rhythmic, hard. Click, click, click. Every head in the courtroom turned. A man was walking down the center aisle. He was tall, wearing a black suit that fit him with military precision. He wore a white shirt, no tie. He carried no briefcase. He held only a thin manila folder in his left hand, holding it by the corner as if it were a blade. He looked at no one. He didn't look at the gallery. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes fixed on the bench. He passed the bar, the wooden railing that separates the public from the court, without pausing. The bailiff, a large man named Carl, who had been a deputy for 20 years, stepped forward to intercept him. "Sir, you cannot pass the bar," Carl said. The man didn't stop. He didn't even slow down. He simply turned his head slightly and looked at Carl. I couldn't see the look, but I saw Carl's reaction. Carl stopped. He stepped back. He actually lowered his head, his hand dropping away from his belt. It was the instinctive reaction of a soldier recognizing a superior officer. The man walked past him. He stopped in the center of the well. Directly between my table and Celeste's, the courtroom was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. Judge Wynne was frozen. His gavel was still raised in the air, suspended like a bad painting. His mouth was slightly open. All the blood had drained from his face, leaving it the color of ash. The man in black placed the thin folder on the plaintiff's table, directly in front of Marianne Voss. He did it gently. Then he turned to the judge. "Who are you?" Judge Wynne whispered. His voice was trembling. "Identifying yourself." The man spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. It was a voice that sounded like it had been cured in smoke and gravel. "My name is Sebastian Marlowe." A gasp went through the room. Not from the gallery, they didn't know the name. From the front. Marianne Voss made a sound like she had been punched in the gut. Celeste covered her face with her hands. Marlowe continued, "I am appearing on behalf of the State Fiduciary Review Division." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He didn't hand it to the bailiff. He placed it on the ledge of the witness stand, leaving it there like an offering. "I am here to serve a directive of preservation and seizure." Marlowe said. Judge Wynne lowered the gavel slowly, setting it down on the wood without making a sound. "Mr. Marlowe," the judge said, "we are in the middle of a proceeding. You have no standing here." Marlowe looked at the judge. He tilted his head slightly. "I have standing. Calder," he said. He used the judge's first name. He said it with a familiarity that was terrifying. "The directive supersedes this court's jurisdiction under the State Security and Asset Control Act of 1998, Marlowe said. He pointed to the folder he had placed in front of Marianne. "That folder contains the audit logs for Garnet River Holdings." Marianne Voss stared at the folder. She looked like she wanted to vomit. She didn't touch it. Marlowe turned to me. For the first time, he looked me in the eye. His eyes were gray, flat, unreadable. But there was a flicker of something there, recognition, or maybe just assessment. "Ms. Evans," he said, "you received a letter." I nodded, unable to speak. "You were told not to trust the living," he said. I nodded again. "You did well," he said. He turned back to the judge. "The State Fiduciary Review Division is assuming immediate custody of the Evans Family Foundation and all associated assets. Marlowe announced. All records are sealed. All proceedings are stayed. He paused. And all current trustees and legal advisors are hereby notified that they are subjects of an active investigation regarding the misappropriation of classified state funds. Classified state funds. The words hung in the air. My father hadn't just been hiding money. The foundation hadn't just been a tax shelter. Garnet River Holdings was a state operation, a black budget project, and my father had been the bagman, or the banker, and Celeste and the judge had been skimming from it. Or maybe they were just trying to shut it down before anyone noticed the discrepancies. Marianne Voss stood up. Her legs were shaking so bad she had to lean on the table. Mr. Marlowe, she stammered. This is irregular. We have a judgment pending. There is no judgment, Marlowe said coldly. There is only the directive. He looked at the court reporter. You will preserve the record of this hearing. He said, do not stop typing. The reporter nodded frantically, her fingers flying. Judge Wynne looked like a man who was watching his own execution. He looked at Marlowe. Then he looked at the exit door behind the bench. Clear the courtroom, the judge whispered. The bailiff didn't move. I said, clear the courtroom, Judge Wynne screamed. Pandemonium broke out. The gallery erupted in whispers and shouts. The bailiff finally snapped out of his trance and started herding people toward the doors. All rise. Clear the court. Everyone out. Marlowe didn't move. He stood in the center of the storm, an anchor of black silence. I stood up. My legs felt like water. Ethan grabbed my arm. Kennedy, we have to go. I looked at Celeste. She hadn't moved. She was staring at the folder on the table. Celeste, I said. She looked up at me. Her face was a ruin. The mask was gone. The glamorous, wealthy sister was gone. There was only a terrified child left. She stood up and stumbled toward me. She grabbed my wrist. Her fingers dug into my skin. It wasn't a violent grab. It was desperate. It was the grip of someone drowning. Kennedy, she whispered. Her breath smelled of mints and bile. What is it? I asked. What did you do? She pulled me close, her lips touching my ear. If they open it, she hissed, looking at Marlowe. If they open the foundation, they will ruin all of us. All of us, I asked. Daddy too, she sobbed. They will ruin Daddy too. He started it. Kennedy, we were just trying to finish it. I pulled back, what I asked. But she didn't answer. Marianne Voss grabbed her arm and pulled her away, shooting a look of pure terror at Marlowe. Ms. Evans, Marlowe said. I turned to him. You will come with me, he said. It wasn't a request. I looked at the closed doors where the public had fled. I looked at the judge, who was now sitting with his head in his hands. I looked at my sister, being dragged away by her lawyer. I realized then that the inheritance case had been a decoy, a play, a distraction. My father hadn't been a victim. He had been a player in a game so dangerous that even in death, he needed a ghost to come and finish it. I looked at Ethan. Go, Ethan said. This is out of my league. I stepped out from behind the table. I walked toward Sebastian Marlowe. He turned and walked toward the side exit, the door usually reserved for judges and staff. He held the door open for me. I stepped through the darkness of the doorway, leaving the courtroom behind. I didn't know if I was walking toward freedom or toward a prison much larger than the one Celeste had tried to build for me. All I knew was that the man in the black suit had come, and the story I thought I was telling, the story of a jealous sister and a stolen inheritance, was over. The real story was just beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope the twists and turns of Briar Hollow kept you on the edge of your seat as much as they did for me while writing it. The world of revenge stories is vast, and Kennedy's journey is far from over. The arrival of Sebastian Marlowe has opened a door that can never be closed. If you enjoyed this story, please take a moment to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel so you never miss a part. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from today? And what do you think was really in those files that made the judge freeze? Let me know your theories below. Thank you for your time, and until the next chapter.